We are Makilala TV, the first Filipino American TV talk show in the New York metro area. Get to know us as we talk to the community leaders, innovators, advocates, and emerging artists who affect Filipino American life.
Chicharon bulaklak, lechon coalet, crispy pata, lumpia Shanghai. Are your mouths watering yet?
Yes.
Other than all being delicious Filipino dishes that we all know and love, they also have something in common, and that is being unhealthy. They are immersed with blocks of MSG. They are deep fried with salt and oils. They are coated with tons of sweet and tangy sauces, and of course, built with love. So if you remember our second episode of Makilala, we had Rodora Ursua from Kalusugan Coalition as our guest for Pinoy Healing. She's now in California in public health, and we touched slightly upon Phil-Am Health. And at this episode of Makilala TV, which is entitled Phil-Ams and Stroke, Why Our Diet Needs to Change, I, RACHELLE Ocampo, and my co-hosts Jen Fuhrer and CRISTINA Pastor are going to examine the importance of a healthy diet in preventing stroke and other diseases that Phil-Ams are susceptible to. So we have two special guests, Dr. Joy Garcia-Dia and Dr. Antonio Moya. Dr. Joy Garcia-Dia is the Director of Clinical Applications, Implementation, and Strategic Projects at Mount Sinai Health System. And she is also the current chair of Kalusugan Coalition and also directs within Kalusugan Coalition the Project Reach Far grant. And that grant, if I'm correct, is improving cardiovascular health for Filipino Americans in the New York, New Jersey areas, right? Okay. Dr. Antonio Moya, you are a neurology resident physician at NewYork-Presbyterian Weill, Cornell. And he is actually passionate about advocating for underserved patients, increasing health literacy in the Asian Pacific Islander communities. So Antonio has also conducted collaborative telemedicine and public health research with doctors in the Philippines and in China while on the Fulbright Fellowship and Master of Public Health program at Harvard. One quick thing is that he also loves thinking about music and the brain. So he plays with his jazz band called the Melatones.
Exactly.
So we'll get into that a little bit too. So you play jazz. What instrument is it?
So I play mostly piano in our group, but I also play alto sax.
Oh my God, just like my son.
You guys should do a duet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll hear a little bit more about the Melatones. So as some of you know, my dad, he just recently suffered from stroke, and he just turned 50. And he did not call 911 right away. He actually called my mom, then called my dad, then called me, left me a voicemail message. I returned back, and then he explained what he was doing. He was in his work parking lot, and he couldn't get out of his car because he was just so weak. My brother ended up going to him. He was passed out inside the car. Thankfully, the AC was on, and they were able to go to the hospital. Thankfully, they were in that really critical time frame.
Yeah.
And if he'd waited another 30 minutes, it would not have been possible for him to get treated with TPA.
Yes.
What is TPA?
TPA stands for Tissue Plasminogen Activator.
Okay, and that's basically this magic drug. If you have a stroke and the only way that it will actually work, or it's best to work, is within a certain time frame.
Exactly.
And what is that time frame?
So the guidelines say 3 to 4.5 hours.
Okay.
The saying in neurology is that time is brain. Time is brain.
Time is brain.
For every minute that you have your stroke, you lose about 1.7 million neurons. So it's of the essence to go to the hospital immediately, once you even think that you're having a stroke or that a family member is having a stroke. So it's good that your father was able to get into the hospital before that critical time window.
Yeah.
At that time, did your father know that he was having a stroke?
No, he was stubborn. He felt like, oh, it's just a stomach ache. Oh, it's just a headache. But he was literally driving and he couldn't see. He drove into the opposite direction, and thankfully no one was on the road, and he just wanted to get to work. He just wanted to get to work.
Yeah, there was actually like steps, like that whether you have that's actually like an acronym.
An acronym, yeah. So
what is it?
That acronym is FAST.
Right.
It came from the Cincinnati Pre-Hospital Stroke Scale. FAST. F stands for face. So if you have a sudden onset of some type of facial asymmetry, oftentimes it's like a facial droop on one side. A stands for arm. If your one arm suddenly feels very weak or numb.
Doesn't have to be a left or right.
It doesn't matter which side. So
Okay.
long as if it's a sudden onset, then might be a stroke.
Okay.
S stands for speech. So if your speech starts getting garbled or slurred, that's something to be aware of. And then T is the time. Time is brain. Call 911 immediately.
Right,
Yeah.
you really have to do the 911. Don't think about it as an expense. It's actually, you don't have to pay when you call
But
911 ambulance.
when you're in that moment, even with me, he called me. He's like, should I call 911? Should I call the ambulance? In my brain, I'm like, oh, that's money. Oh, bills. Just thinking like practically, but really in reality, you won't have that time with your family if you are paralyzed and you can't talk.
And if you think about it, stroke is one of the most expensive diseases to treat because you may not necessarily die from the stroke, but like you were saying, you might be disabled from that, and that's a whole lifetime of disability. It's actually the number one cause of permanent disability in the U.S.
So tell me, is my dad's case typical of Filipinos? What is it about being Filipino or Fil-Am that makes us more susceptible to diabetes, to cardiovascular, to diseases?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where the impetus of how Kalusugan Coalition came about way back in 2005. Because when we tried to search on what's the current state of Filipino health, and you do it in Google, there was really not much data that's pertinent to Filipinos particularly. There are data that's related with Asian Americans, but not to our own ethnic group.
None.
So that kind of like stimulated the groundbreaking interviews that Kalusugan Coalition did in partnership with New York University Center for the Study of Asian American Health. They tried to understand what is the major disease that Filipinos are suffering, and right on the money is cardiovascular health and diabetes, and of course there's also other behavioral problems related.
Well, they said stroke is basically a heart attack of the brain. Is that something, is that true or not?
That's, I would steer away from saying that. Well, it is a similar mechanism, but the one thing I want to make very clear is a heart attack is not a stroke. So a stroke has to do with the brain. A heart attack has to do exactly with the heart. And when we think about stroke, we oftentimes think of two things. Either the blood vessels going to the brain are blocked by a blood clot, and that blood clot can be as small as a grain of rice. So blockage of the brain, or the other thing is bursting of a blood vessel in the brain.
That's so scary to even think about.
Hemorrhagic stroke.
And I think that's where we need to also raise the community awareness part. I'm a registered nurse by trade, and what we do from our end is really more on prevention and health promotion. So this is where what he's trying to explain is people kind of like associate stroke with heart attack, but actually the one factor that could lead you to develop a stroke is if you have hypertension.
So it's really all
interrelated, and this is where we're coming from in terms of raising awareness and how do you manage your own health by preventing you to go into a hypertensive state. And you could probably do modification with your diet and with your physical activity in order to prevent you from going into that direction. I understand your dad was 50 years old, but there are cumulative factors that would have contributed for him to develop stroke.
Like him drinking soda every day. That might be the reason.
Having how many grams of
Or
sugar.
it might be something that you get from
Or
your fruits.
it's really more on the sodium component, right, of
Salt.
our diet. Yeah, the salt component of it.
patis.
The sugar part would probably lead him to diabetes, but for the stroke portion, it's really the salt content in our diet.
And I wanted to also bring this up. Some of the materials that you brought here from, is it Kalusugan Coalition or
Yes.
is it from Project Reach Far?
So
Can I just, before you do that,
yeah.
when you talk about the sugar part, if you take in more sugar, it's also not good for your blood pressure or also raise your cholesterol because it turns into glucose. Then you're, like, you get insulin. And I mean, I don't know the technical terms. So I just, because most people think that, okay, if I stay away from patis, then I can eat all my rice, my carbs, and I'll be okay.
Right.
But then your heart will still be messed up.
Right.
Yeah, so
Am I wrong,
it's interesting
or-
that you bring that up. So all of them are
interrelated.
So diabetes, when you have high blood sugar, that can cause damage to the blood vessels all throughout the body. So that includes blood vessels going to the eye, blood vessels going to the kidneys, blood vessels going to the tips of your fingers and hands, so you start developing neuropathy or just nerve problems. But the other thing is that you can cause damage to the blood vessels going to the heart and blood vessels going to the brain. So definitely diabetes is a risk factor. It's not as strong as a risk factor as having high blood pressure, which is the number one risk factor for stroke, but it also contributes to heart disease and stroke.
Okay.
I call diabetes kind of like the gateway disease. If you have
that's
diabetes,
horrible.
you're entering into that realm of heart attacks, stroke, kidney failure.
Is that the first predictor that something is about to go wrong? Having diabetes?
Actually, for stroke, there's so many different risk factors for it, but oftentimes it will happen very quickly. The thing with stroke is it's sudden. They used to call it a stroke they call it a stroke because they'd say it's a stroke of bad luck.
That's how I never even thought of why
It's called a
stroke is a
stroke,
stroke.
But we've tried to move to the terminology brain attack so that people understand it's like a heart attack for the brain, but it's a brain attack, and a heart attack is an attack in the heart.
Okay, before you go back to that, it's important. My dad had 2 heart attacks. He had quadruple bypass, and then finally his kidneys couldn't take all this medication he was taking, so he had to go on dialysis. And then he's rest in peace. I love him and I miss him, but it's important that, as you said, we have to educate our people because sometimes they don't know, like, okay, I have these pills, then I can eat anything that I want.
Yeah, they try to overcompensate. Like, I got vitamins.
I have the cholesterol pills, then I can eat, lechon or anything because it will control my cholesterol anyway. So go back to Kalusugan. Maybe you could educate our audience that
absolutely.
there's no such thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we partner again with NYU CISA, and there is this Project Reach grant, which is it means racial and ethnic approaches to community health. And what we try to do is we partner with faith-based organizations because that's where people come together and they serve communal meals. And we partner also with the New York City Department of Health in trying to establish a Keep on Track Train the Trainer program, so we could teach the congregation on how to encourage volunteers to be part of the process of monitoring the blood pressure of their congregation.
I love that
that's
because
the first step.
it's not having people go to the hospital or clinics to get education. You're actually going to the churches. You're going to these congregations and being where they are.
Yes, exactly.
Mary Joy, you said something before. I attended one of your conferences, and you were working with one of the Filipino restaurants.
Exactly.
I think that was Payag.
Yes.
And you were doing substitution.
Correct.
Like, instead of using salt, you were recommending something else.
Yes.
Would you like to talk to us about
Sure.
that?
So in addition to the faith-based organization, and another approach is partnering with a local restaurant. So we actually have 3 now. So we have Payag, Tito Rod's, and Kabayan. And what we do is we have a nutritional consultant who assess their menu, and from that menu we ask the restaurant owners to provide us a sample of their ingredients from an appetizer level, a main entree, and a side dish.
Okay.
And the
So you had like a nice sample of food from each of
Yes,
these restaurants.
yes.
Why didn't we get the invite? Oh my gosh.
we should
That's what
probably
Christina
get,
was saying.
we
You
should-
never get the invitation.
yes.
What did you find out?
So
Yeah.
what the nutritionists have found out is that there are adjustments that we could make
Yeah.
in terms of the ingredients. So let's say, for example, the fresh lumpia. When she did the analysis, it's close to what the American Health Association guidelines is for a healthy heart diet, but there could still be some adjustment in terms of like lowering the sugar content by probably putting the sauce on the side versus absorbing everything in that one meal. The other piece,
Filipinos are going to be
I
like,
know.
Keep pouring the whole thing.
can I get extra?
Exactly. And our intent is not really to change the business model of the restaurants because,
Just give choices.
We want to incorporate healthy choices. So as an educated consumer,
Yeah.
you know that you could have alternate options when you dine out.
Yeah, it's up to you whether you want to take care of your heart or
Yes.
not. So, but
Yes.
you're not but at least they have a choice.
Yes. And one
Brown
thing,
rice or white rice.
exactly. Yeah. And we
what
try
was the
to
result of
encourage
that?
them.
Did the diners notice anything different in what they were eating?
Or did they even make the changes yet?
So the changes are there in terms of partnering with them. So we also try to train the servers so that they could also mention those kind of options.
Got it.
Yes.
That's
a
So were
really
the
good selling point.
customers
Yeah.
accepting the healthy choices, or were they still going into the?
Yeah, that's
the
a good
old-
question because our first phase was really more on modification of the menu. So the second step would be what's the feedback from the customers. So when we tried to brainstorm with the owners, they were also doing some suggestions like, can we do like a satisfaction survey from the customer? So that would be our next
Okay.
step, trying to see if they really notice these changes that we have because we also have like table tents and we have like informational materials like this. So while
this
we're
is
waiting-
scary.
Wait, on the table?
In the
You
table?
have this?
Yeah, you
So-
got every 39 seconds someone dies.
From a
while
heart
you're
attack
eating
or
it-
stroke. So while you're eating, let your wallet.
we have like not so scary materials, but
Die.
something that would catch their eye.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I still haven't seen that because social media, a lot of people post whatever food they're eating.
Yeah.
And I felt like I really want people to eat healthy.
Yes, yes.
But no, maybe 80% of the time you could cheat, like maybe on the weekends once in a while. But every time I see like people that I love, they're posting all this food that I know it's gonna bite them sometime. I go like, oh my god.
That's where I think,
like
like-
tapsilog every day
Yeah.
in the morning. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's delicious, but then you're clogging your heart.
No, it's very true, and that's where we were making the point before about how the environment around you really shapes the way your health behaviors
Yes.
form. So if I think it's a great idea having maybe even on the menu like what are the calories or how much sugar or the kind of the equivalents, because the more the consumer knows about what they're actually eating, the more they can make the decision
Right.
on whether or not
Correct.
they want the
Right.
chicharon bulaklak
Yeah.
or the kilawin instead.
We should have that in every fiesta
Right.
or every
I think
every
you should
event.
stop. I think you should stop eating with your friends.
Find new friends. Find new friends.
One thing though that we also kind of like educate the consumer is like how the Department of Health have those ABC ratings in the restaurants.
Yes.
So the restaurant owners have agreed for us to put like a decal. So there's that Million Hearts Initiative flyer.
Oh, that's
so,
actually-
so they would know that okay, this is like a Million Heart Initiative partner restaurant. They have like healthy choices available on their menu. So I'm not sure if the consumer tries to read those information, but it's just that you try to identify other ways aside from social media and how to make that awareness.
Right.
What
Some
about,
people.
what about putting calorie count? Does that help at all?
I think it does.
Or does that
sometimes it's like
does
bad
that
calories,
Make, Does that make people very unhappy when they enter a restaurant?
Really? People are unhappy because
Yeah, when they see a calorie count.
they just do this. Just
Sometimes
Cover it up.
there are good calories and bad calories. You
Do we
can
even
have
know what they are?
you can have like a whole cake for 250 calories, which is very tiny. And then you could have.
As opposed to-
I think it's also about like portion control. I think that we
And some
love
yeah, you're right.
we love buffets because we feel like that is gonna be the worth of our money. Like
I know that's
$20.
really that's why it's hard to go to buffet.
Yeah. Well,
I know that you have over here a nutritional facts kind of sheet too. I don't know if you passed that out.
yes,
but,
yes.
Sometimes they're hard to read, but
this is in Tagalog.
So this is what we did. Because we wanted to make sure that it's culturally and linguistically applicable to Filipinos. We also converted it into Tagalog translation. So
Even though for Filipinos?
Yes.
So it's that
Wait a
English
minute.
is-
This has New York City Department of Health logo.
yes,
And we have Tagalog
Yes.
in here?
Yeah. We
Yes.
even have Ilocano.
yes.
We do not.
One of
You're
the
gonna show me
languages.
later. Show me
You-
later.
That's one of the
So
languages.
what we do is we try to translate it because I understand like majority of us speak
English.
English.
Yeah.
We are taught in English. But we also want to make sure that we're covering all types of languages. So the unintended outcome of this initiative was that we didn't partner with groceries, but one of the organizations that also is part of the project, which is the Korean Community Services, and they were doing their education and Hanyang food market in Bergenfield. And the owner actually approached them and said, well, if they're doing this for the Koreans, is there something for Filipinos? Because we have a lot of Filipinos who do
Idea,
grocery
yeah.
shopping.
That's good.
So we're actually going there in July 16, I believe, and we'll be partnering with the Korean Association, and we'll be
Wow.
distributing this as part of our community
Yeah.
awareness
What
in the,
about our-
in
what
the
about our
groceries.
own grocery
Yeah, our own
stores?
grocery stores.
Yes, we actually went to our own grocery
Oh,
stores.
okay. What about
How
us?
was it? How
Oh
was
my
it?
God! Can you imagine rating our own grocery store?
That's what California-
Because we wanted to do like a
There'll be
comparison.
nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing for sale.
Nothing for sale.
Well, I think the goal is really for people to understand how to read the nutrition facts. So we try to tell them, what's the serving size and look for the amount of sodium, which is
I
very
think
important.
Just the fact that you're teaching them to look at the labels, to look
Right.
at the ingredients,
huge.
I think
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
huge because most people are just like, okay, just buy it, looks good.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned earlier about portion sizes. I mean, some people think that you could eat as much and then just run a mile and it's okay, but that's not true.
Isn't that okay?
No,
You run a mile.
you run a mile, you
You
just
run
burn
a mile.
150 calories.
Oh my god.
As opposed, and then you have like a whole plate of 1,500.
Yeah,
Well,
we're becoming a society more that it's hard when we have all this calorie counting and all that thing. It gives you a good ballpark idea of how much we're eating in terms of sugar and calories, but really in terms of diet, I like this. There's like a writer who wrote 3 very simple steps to a good diet. Eat food, which means real food, not Cheetos or
okay.
something that didn't exist 200 years ago.
Like
so
cotton
eat
candy?
food,
Okay.
mostly plants, so a vegetable-rich diet,
Vegetables.
whole grains, and just enough.
Okay.
Not
Ooh, that's a big
overdoing it.
problem.
If you follow
That's my
those 3
problem.
things, you're already on your way to a healthy diet. You don't have to have this, the fanciness of, counting calories in a certain way. It becomes a lifestyle. It's no longer like
Right.
an onerous type of thing.
We have some sort of hesitation, which is truly understandable because we couldn't really remove the business component of the restaurants, right? They have to survive. And of course, they also need to cater to people like us who migrated from the Philippines and we culturally connect with our food.
Right.
So
That is
we miss
huge
those
component.
we miss those kind of menus or selections, and that's the reason why we go to the restaurants, because we want to celebrate birthdays, we want to celebrate milestones.
Yeah.
And
Every day.
Every day.
so yes, of course, they need to be responsible, but until we educate them also from that perspective, and we partner with them, that they won't be able to influence what are the choices that's available for the consumers, for the diners, and also teaching the young kids. Because one of the striking statement that one of the owners said was that, we try to promote this as well. As you can see, we grill our food, we offer side dishes for vegetables, but then these parents bring their kids with them, and they have a McDonald's because they don't like the food that we serve here
Oh
because they
my
grew up in
gosh,
McDonald's.
that's so
Yeah.
true. I see that all the time.
You can bring McDonald's to a restaurant.
So
If you want your kids to behave, if you want
yes,
kids
of
to
course.
behave, you give
But
them
the
McDonald's.
point is, we set our examples as parents. We are also
Right, that's
responsible
true.
on how we teach our kids to be more, attuned to what kind of healthy snacks do we offer them.
It's interesting you bring up the kids. I really feel like behavior is so hard to change, and especially
That's
in
true,
public
yeah.
health. But if you start with the kids, giving them good food, and then educating them, increasing health literacy, oftentimes, like for my own example, my family didn't eat very well when we moved from the Philippines to the U.S. My dad had a quadruple bypass surgery.
What is going on with this quadruple?
It's the diet.
Well, we have family
And
history
hereditary.
and the diet as well. But when that happened, and this was before medical school, before college, just read up everything about heart disease. My grandmother had a stroke, read up all about that, and I said, how can I change, like as a kid, how can I change what we have at home so that my parents don't ever have to go through that again?
And
Because
what did you do?
Well, so what we did, white rice, I said we need to change to brown rice. We need to cut down a little bit more. If you don't
With
like white
things
rice,
like
let's
that, yeah.
let's mix it up a little bit, white and brown rice.
Yeah.
The meat portions, especially red meat, we tried to limit more seafood. Especially bangos is really good. Or paksiw, we would eat kilawin. When we go out, limit the crispy pata. Limit the sizzling sisig.
Leave it going out. It's
And-
harder to make going out.
Still invited.
Well, they know that when I come back home, I inspect the food because really it's
You
the
should.
environment.
You
It's
really
so hard to
should.
change
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah, you have to actually
with
go to
the
the
environment.
pantry and
Right.
don't feel bad tossing away
Yeah.
the stuff
Exactly.
that has like
That chocolate
960
cake. Yeah.
chocolate cake that you get at ShopRite.
Right.
Exactly.
Or
And since we're
anything
talking
else.
about stroke, actually, so 80% of strokes can actually be prevented. You believe that's so about 800,000 people this year, 2016, according to the American Heart Association, will have a stroke. So that's as many people almost as the city of San Francisco having a stroke. And they estimate about 130,000 people actually dying from stroke this year. So all these could be prevented with the proper, they call it the simple 7. Controlling your blood pressure, that's number 1. Controlling blood sugar, that's number 2. Cholesterol, that's number 3. And then the lifestyle things, your diet, no smoking, exercise, and then losing weight. Those are the 7 things.
I hate to bring it to a close, but I did want to just check in one last minute and ask you one last question. What is one practical step, that our viewers can do to lead healthier lives, particularly to prevent stroke? What is one thing that they can do at home or in practice
To prevent stroke.
to prevent stroke?
So, knowing your blood pressure. If you even just go into the Walgreens or the CVS and don't be afraid to put your hand through that little cup, take that blood pressure. Because if you know that you have high blood pressure, you already know that you have a risk for heart attack and for stroke, leading causes of death in the U.S.
Okay.
And I think from my perspective, it's really more of raising your self-awareness because you know who you are, where you want to be, and what you could do for your family. So you have healthy options that's available. You educate yourself, and you take control on what kind of food do you serve for your family because it affects everyone.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Mary Joy Garcia-Dia and Dr. Antonia Moya. It has been a pleasure and super educational. I did not realize all these little things and tips that we could really take back home to our families.
One more thing, there's a website. If you're having an acute stroke or you think that you're having the face weakness, arm weakness, speech difficulty, call 911 immediately. And if you want to know where the closest stroke centers are around you, these are centers specialized in taking care of stroke. There's a website, it's www.strokecenter.org/trials/centers.
Great.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
a good. You can just
That's
put your
good.
zip code, and then you know which hospitals
one.
are specialized stroke centers.
And one more thing from my end, we are going to have another educational event. That's what we did with the press group last
right,
February. It's going to be in July 29, and we will be featuring panel speakers that will talk more about the state of Filipinos' health on hypertension, and also a testimony from one of our partners from the faith-based organization and what they've done so far and what are
That's
the
so
impacts.
powerful.
So that's going to be in July 29, and I hope that everyone could join us in participating, listening to this.
Yeah, we'll definitely share it.
Definitely.
All right, thank
Great.
you again for being at Makilala TV.
Thank you.
Thank you.